Have you ever wondered what it truly means to be a hero? What if the biggest heroes were never recognized? If this story intrigued you, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel, so we can keep bringing you more stories that make you think. Lena Donovan had always moved through the halls of Fort Liberty unnoticed. In the quiet hum of the military base, her presence was a whisper, someone who worked diligently, who blended in, who never drew attention to herself. But that morning, things would change. As she walked past the main gate, she was stopped by Sergeant Miller, a man with an eye for what didn't belong. His eyes scanned her appearance, work boots, worn jacket, faded jeans, and immediately, suspicion flickered in his gaze. He didn't see the woman who had worked silently behind the scenes for years. He saw an outsider. "You don't belong here," he sneered, grabbing her badge from her neck before she could react. His voice cut through the air, loud enough to turn heads. "Move along, civilian." But Lena stood still, calm, almost expecting this moment. Captain Barnes, walking by with his coffee, noticed something unusual as Miller pushed her away. Her sleeve had slipped up just enough to reveal a faded but intricate tattoo on her arm. The insignia caught Barnes' attention, an emblem from the highest military ranks, something only a select few could recognize. In that instant, everything shifted. Lena Donovan was no longer just a contractor. Her past, a hidden story of sacrifice, was about to come to light. Sergeant Miller's eyes narrowed as he scanned Lena Donovan from head to toe. The worn jacket and faded jeans she wore didn't match the uniformed personnel who normally walked through the gates of Fort Liberty. In his mind, that was all the justification he needed. Without any hesitation, he yanked her badge from her neck, his fingers tightening around it. "Move along, civilian. You're not welcome here," he barked, his voice sharp enough to catch the attention of nearby soldiers. They watched as he pushed her toward the civilian lot, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and judgment. Lena didn't flinch. She remained calm, letting the humiliation wash over her without a word. There was no fight in her. It was the same as always, being pushed aside by those who didn't understand. But today, something was different. As Sergeant Miller's grip tightened, the edge of her long sleeve shifted, revealing part of the tattoo on her arm. The insignia was subtle, hidden beneath layers of clothing, but Captain Barnes, who happened to be walking by, caught sight of it. He froze. It was the emblem of an elite military unit, one that not everyone had the privilege to know. Barnes' eyes widened in recognition. He had seen it before. This wasn't just any civilian contractor. His mind raced, trying to process the meaning of what he was witnessing. The air around him seemed to shift, his hand instinctively clutching the coffee cup that suddenly felt too heavy. What had started as a routine, albeit harsh, moment was now spiraling into something far more complicated. Lena Donovan wasn't who they thought she was. And the realization was beginning to sink in, like a ripple in a pond that could no longer be ignored. Captain Barnes couldn't take his eyes off the tattoo. It was unmistakable, a symbol that spoke of deep military knowledge and high-level security clearance. He had seen the insignia in classified reports and top-secret briefings. This was not the emblem of just anyone. It was the mark of a highly respected and highly secretive military unit, the 52nd Combat Engineering Battalion. He knew what it meant. He knew the kind of operations this unit undertook. The kind of danger they faced. The kind of sacrifices they made. And suddenly, Lena Donovan wasn't just a contractor. She was someone with a history that went far beyond the civilian world she now inhabited. Her past wasn't something she talked about. It wasn't something anyone knew. But Barnes could see it now, like a flicker of something hidden beneath the surface. Her calm demeanor, the military precision in her every movement, it all started to make sense. Lena was no ordinary civilian contractor. She had seen combat. She had been to hell and back. Barnes quickly waved over his radio, calling for someone to confirm what he had seen. The recognition in his eyes was palpable as the pieces began to fall into place. He had just witnessed a revelation, but even more important, he knew this was just the beginning. The truth about Lena Donovan was far deeper than anyone could have imagined. Lena Donovan had never wanted to be seen. She had spent the last few years building a life far from the one that once defined her. A life in the shadows, a life where she could keep the past buried beneath layers of secrecy. But the truth was, that past could never truly be erased. Lena had been Kia in Afghanistan. She had been declared dead after a horrific explosion, the kind of explosion that shattered everything. The kind of explosion that left no hope for survival. But Lena did survive. She had crawled from the rubble, buried for days, her hands bloodied and bruised as she fought her way back to life. What followed was a life she never expected. The military had made her a ghost. A name on a list of those who were lost. She was given a new identity, a civilian one, far from the battlefield where she had earned her place. Far from the friends she had lost. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the work she did, work that helped keep the military's systems running. The work that kept Fort Liberty's infrastructure intact. And it was work she did with precision, with care, with a level of expertise that suggested there was far more to Lena Donovan than anyone knew. Her life was built on secrets, on a promise she had made to remain invisible. But as Captain Barnes looked at the tattoo on her arm, the first cracks in her carefully constructed silence began to show. The tattoo was more than a mark on her skin. It was a map, a history written in ink. Each line, each curve, held the weight of a past that Lena had never shared. The 52nd Combat Engineering Battalion insignia was the first clue. It was a symbol of elite service, of courage, of sacrifice. It wasn't just a badge, it was a testament to everything Lena had done before she had vanished into civilian life. But it was the rest of the tattoo that told the deeper story. Beneath the insignia were names, names etched in elegant script, each followed by dates and locations. These weren't just dates. These were coordinates. Coordinates that pointed to military operations in Afghanistan, operations that Lena had been a part of. Some of the names were familiar to Lena, brothers in arms who had fought beside her, who had given their lives in the same hell she had lived through. But it was the last part of the tattoo that told the most personal story. Two simple notations, followed by dates and coordinates, marked the moments that had forever changed her life. A bronze star and a purple heart, decorations for bravery in the face of unspeakable danger. These weren't just awards, they were symbols of the sacrifices Lena had made, the risk she had taken. They were the silent markers of a woman who had risked everything for her country. And yet, here she stood, in a place where no one knew her story. In a place where the truth was hidden beneath layers of secrecy. A woman whose past had been buried, until now. As the truth about Lena Donovan began to spread, the base's perception of her shifted. No longer was she the quiet contractor who arrived each day with her tool belt and quietly fixed systems. She was now someone different, a decorated war hero who had been living in plain sight, her past hidden behind layers of civilian life. Captain Barnes, who had once only known Lena as a professional, now saw her in a new light. He knew the implications of what he had just discovered. He also knew that this discovery would change everything. But before he could process the magnitude of what he had learned, the base commander was already being informed, and the wheels of truth began to turn. Rodriguez, the man who had judged Lena so harshly, now found himself facing the consequences of his actions. His assumptions, based on nothing but appearances, had led him to persecute someone who had given more than he could ever understand. The harassment he had inflicted on Lena would now come back to haunt him. As Lena's true identity was revealed, the base members who had once dismissed her began to see her differently. They began to understand the quiet dignity she had carried with her, the courage she had shown when no one was looking. Lena's life was no longer just about fixing pipes and power systems. It was about something much greater, the silent service of a woman who had given everything, and who had chosen to live in the shadows, away from the public eye. Lena Donovan had never wanted recognition. She had never asked for it. Her military career had been one of quiet sacrifice, and now her civilian life mirrored that same quiet service. She didn't want ceremonies or public applause. She had made a promise to stay dead, to live in the shadows where her past couldn't find her. But that didn't mean she was not a hero. She was still saving lives every day, still working in the same precise, disciplined way that had earned her the respect of her fellow soldiers. Now, as the base learned the truth, they began to recognize her for who she truly was, not just a contractor, but a woman who had given everything for them. Yet, Lena didn't want any of it. She didn't need the medals, the praise, or the attention. She had already given everything she could. What mattered now was doing her job, continuing to serve without recognition. It was the only thing that had ever truly mattered to her. In the quiet of the base, Lena continued her work, fixing broken systems and unseen problems, while the world around her began to understand the depth of her sacrifice. She was no longer just Lena Donovan, the contractor. She was the quiet hero, the one who had given everything and asked for nothing in return. Sergeant Miller had no idea what he had just unleashed. What started as a small act of prejudice against Lena Donovan had now spiraled into something much bigger than he could have ever imagined. The truth about Lena's past had turned the base's perception of her upside down. What once seemed like a quiet, ordinary woman was now revealed to be a decorated war hero. Rodriguez's vendetta against Lena had grown into a campaign of harassment. But as his actions were exposed, it was clear that he had been wrong about her. His pride, his need to assert authority, had blinded him to the truth. And now, the consequences of his prejudice were coming for him. The base commander had already intervened. The report from Captain Barnes was enough to change everything. Rodriguez's bullying had been revealed for what it was, nothing more than a petty abuse of power. And now, he would face disciplinary action for his actions. Lena, on the other hand, remained calm. She didn't need to say a word. The truth had come to light, and with it, the recognition she had never asked for. But the question remained, what would happen to Rodriguez? The man who had tried to destroy her reputation would now face the consequences of his actions. As Rodriguez's fate hung in the balance, Lena simply continued her work, doing what she had always done. Quietly, without fanfare, without recognition, she served. Lena Donovan had always been a quiet force. She didn't crave attention. She didn't need it. Her work spoke for itself, and that was enough for her. But as the truth about her past became known, the people around her began to treat her differently. They began to understand the depth of her sacrifice, the cost of her silence. While Rodriguez's downfall was inevitable, Lena's rise had been quiet, subtle. She continued her work, but now there was respect in the way others treated her. The maintenance crews, once indifferent, now offered assistance. The officers nodded in acknowledgement. And though Lena never asked for any of it, she could feel the shift in the way she was perceived. She wasn't just a contractor anymore. She was something more. And the ripple effect of her quiet heroism was spreading through the base, changing the culture one small act at a time. Lena remained unchanged. She continued her work in silence, but now the respect she had earned was apparent in every interaction. The base had learned the hard way that heroism wasn't always visible. Sometimes, it was quiet, unseen, but no less significant. Lena Donovan had lived most of her life in the shadows. She had given everything for her country, and in return, she had been asked to remain hidden. But in the quiet moments, when no one was watching, Lena made sure her legacy lived on. Through anonymous donations, Lena helped the families of fallen soldiers. She provided for those who had lost everything, ensuring that their lives could continue in some small way. She did it all without recognition, without any expectation of thanks. Her legacy wasn't about medals or public recognition. It was about the quiet, unseen acts of service that made a real difference. And though her name would never appear in a history book, those who knew the truth would remember her. Lena Donovan had become more than just a contractor. She had become a symbol of quiet heroism, a reminder that sometimes, the greatest acts of courage are the ones that go unnoticed. As the months passed, Lena Donovan's presence at Fort Liberty became a subtle but powerful force. She worked diligently on every project, fixing broken systems, ensuring that the military infrastructure remained intact. Her colleagues, who had once viewed her with indifference, now recognized the quiet authority she carried. They had learned her story, or at least enough of it, to understand that Lena was no ordinary contractor. She had earned her place through actions, not words, and her work spoke volumes. Her influence spread beyond the walls of her work area. Every time someone mentioned her name, there was a new tone of respect not born from formal recognition but from understanding the sacrifices she had made. Lena didn't need parades or ceremonies. She had long since stopped seeking validation. But the respect she received was still meaningful, still something that showed the power of silently serving without the expectation of applause. And yet, even as the base slowly shifted its perception, one lingering figure remained in the shadows, Rodriguez. His once unshakable confidence had been shattered, and his career had stalled in the aftermath of his prejudice. Isolated from his former allies, he watched as the base's culture changed, growing uncomfortable with the newfound respect Lena commanded. He had underestimated her. The change at Fort Liberty wasn't loud. It didn't come with grand speeches or dramatic ceremonies. It was in the small moments. The nods of acknowledgement when Lena passed by, the way the maintenance crew went out of their way to assist her, or the silent respect from the officers as they saw her doing the work she had always done. The change was in the quiet understanding that true heroism didn't require recognition. It only required the opportunity to serve. Rodriguez, once a source of tension for Lena, had become a relic of the past. His career, once built on rigid hierarchies and assumptions, had faltered. Meanwhile, Lena's influence quietly continued to grow. Those who had once dismissed her were now among her most loyal allies. The change she brought about was subtle, but it was undeniable. Her silent revolution was taking root. Lena's work at Fort Liberty never stopped. She continued to lead critical infrastructure projects, ensuring the base operated smoothly. But beyond the walls of the base, her contributions went unnoticed by most. Through anonymous donations, Lena helped the families of soldiers who had been left behind, paying off medical bills, covering college tuition, and ensuring mortgages were paid. No one knew who the mysterious benefactor was, just that someone was watching over those who needed it most. This was Lena's true legacy, the one she had chosen to leave behind. It wasn't about medals, speeches, or ceremonies. It was about making a difference in the lives of those who couldn't fight for themselves. Her generosity, her quiet acts of service, were the true markers of her heroism. And though she would never step into the limelight, her influence would ripple out far beyond Fort Liberty's gates. As Lena's time at the base continued, the transformation was becoming complete. She had gone from being an outsider to an integral part of the base's daily operations. But it wasn't just the base that had changed. The people around her had been altered as well. They had learned to see past the surface, to recognize the quiet strength in those who didn't seek attention. Rodriguez, who had once thought himself above it all, had been removed from any significant position. His downfall had become a cautionary tale, a reminder that assumptions and prejudices could blind even the most steadfast individuals. The base had learned that heroism could take many forms, and not all heroes wore uniforms or marched in parades. Lena Donovan's name would never appear in the official records. Her medals would remain tucked away in a drawer, hidden from the world. But in the quiet corners of Fort Liberty, her legacy lived on. It lived in the respect that others gave her, in the small moments of acknowledgement that rippled through the base, and in the lasting impact of her silent service. True heroes, Lena had shown, don't need applause. They only need the opportunity to continue serving, and in her case, the opportunity to do so in silence. In life, true heroism often goes unnoticed. It's not always about public recognition, but about quietly serving, making a difference in the lives of others without seeking applause. The most valuable contributions are often the ones made in silence, with dedication and integrity. It's a reminder that character is built not on what others see, but on what we do when no one is watching. If you resonate with this message, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to support the channel. Let's continue sharing these life lessons together.